the devil in a satanic ritual, that they would allow them to walk free after 18 years. Of course not. They know they're innocent, but they want to protect themselves from accountability. Some people have said, well, they want to also protect themselves from being sued for wrongful conviction, which, the average wrongful conviction case is worth $1 million a year, times 18 years, times 3 defendants. That's $54 million, if I'm doing my math correctly, or something like that. But they could have even signed, a way that they won't sue for wrongful conviction. It's all about accountability. And that's how these things happen. That's why post-conviction takes for so long. Nobody wants to be accountable. And I think it's so cowardly and disturbing that this is how these guys ended up free. I mean, I took Jason to both the Berlin Film Festival with Paradise Lost 3, and there's a great documentary festival in Amsterdam called IDFA, International Documentary Festival of Amsterdam. And both of those border crossings were fraught with delays and problems because in the computer, it's Jason Baldwin, convicted child killer. Jason wants to study law and become a lawyer. He can't do it because he's a convicted child killer. So, yes, it felt great that the movie had an impact on people and those people pushed and pushed until these guys were let out. But sad that it's the Alford plea and they're not fully exonerated.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. The Alford plea is it's like a Sophie's Choice kind of thing. And we've had, I don't know how many people on wrongful conviction who have resorted to that. They have so much leverage when you're looking at the amount of time it will take to go back for another trial. Yeah. You're going to spend that time in prison awaiting that trial. If you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's faced with that choice, if you know that you've already been framed once or gotten, convicted of something you didn't do, however it got to that once, you would be hard-pressed to risk the rest of your life in a system that has already... Yeah, and Damien was truly unhealthy and being abused by guards, and that's ultimately why I think... they're all heroes to me, but Jason Baldwin acted very heroically because he was ready to stay and fight and clear his name, but everyone felt that Damien's health was in such a state that to wait any longer might be detrimental. So he made that decision. Yeah, it would have been a death sentence. Jason, of all the 80-something episodes we've recorded now, his was really, it was difficult to even hear the stories that he told. He's such an amazingly gentle, soul. And, he was, 90, 100 pounds back then, right?
16-year-old little kid.
The little kid.
Who actually did well in school. And you're right, that was the vibe he was giving off, was this sweet little boy talking to me about fishing and what he likes to do when he's not at school and drawing. He was an avid drawer. And while he's talking to me, I'm looking at his tiny little wrists. Because if you believe the prosecution's story, it's Baldwin who wielded the serrated hunting knife that castrated the Byers boy. And I'm talking to this sweet little kid and staring at his wrist and trying to imagine that this guy knifed these kids in the way that it was alleged. And I just found it incredible.
Jason Baldwin on the show. It was an experience I'll never forget. When this all came down, you were in 10th grade?
10th grade.
10th grade. Let's just reflect on that for a second. You're not even anywhere near being an adult in 10th grade. So then you end up getting sent to maximum security prison.
Correct. When you first go to prison and you're not going to death row, you go to what's called a diagnostic unit, and that's where they evaluate you mentally and physically to determine what your parent unit in the Department of Corrections will be, because they have a myriad of prisons on various different old slave plantations in the South. And each of them are different and in different ways by age and your strength and things like that. And when I went to diagnostics, they saw me like you saw me, as a small, innocent kid. And at diagnostics, they were like, we've got to send you to one of two places, Jason, or you're not going to make it. PC, protective custody, or what's called SPU, suicide prevention unit. In suicide prevention unit, you'll have your own cell. And, I looked at it like this. At the time, we didn't have very many people on our side. In fact, it was just us. And I was thrust into this incredibly impossible situation. and I was escorted everywhere I went in the prison. And so I'd see the people in SPU going to chow, and they'd be doing the Thorazine shuffle because they're so heavily medicated. And I had a fear that if I acquiesced and let them put me in SPU, that they would forcefully medicate me and I would lose my mind and my ability to think and reason and to fight. And so I said, no, I can't do that. And as far as the PC, protective custody, anybody knows if you are saying you are so weak that you need protection, that people are going to see that and prey on you even more. And so I knew I had to, some way, some fashion, stand on my own 2 feet in there and earn everybody's respect, from the inmates and guards alike. And they said, well, if you're not going to one of these places, we're going to have to send you to Varner. And at the time, they had just shipped all these guys from the Little Tucker unit to Varner, and they were destroying the place. They said it was just chaos and destruction and just incredibly violent place. And that's where they were going to have to send me. And I just told them, well, if that's what you got to do, you got to do it. And so they did eventually send me to Varner unit, and it was everything they said it was.
How did you survive there?
And, by the grace of God, as you said, I guess I was incredibly lucky, but I was incredibly blessed too. I went in there, they opened up, and Mr. Patton stepped out, and his clerk stepped out, and Mr. Patton says, Inmate Baldwin, I'm Mr. Patton, the classification officer. I'll be assigning you to your housing unit, and this is my clerk, Mojo. And they tell me you got to stand up for yourself in here, or these people will run you over and turn you into a sex slave and all these horrible things and make you pay money for protection and stuff like that. And so they assigned me to 7 barracks, and 7 barracks at the Varner unit is intake barracks. I walked down the hall, and as I'm walking next to this barracks, and it's got bulletproof glass 3 stories high, and these guys are beating on it, right? It's plexiglass, it's got chicken wire in it, and there are cell bars on the inside of it going all the way up 3 stories, and I look, and these guys are literally climbing this thing. They are climbing it above one another, hanging onto the bars, looking at me, beating the glass and pointing at me, because they've been watching the trial on TV and the hearings and stuff for an entire year. It's like a pep rally, right? They're finally going to have their hands on me, right? And I get there, and Sergeant Ivy's working the door, and he tells me, he says, if you go in there and stand up for yourself, I got your back. If not, they got you. And I'm just holding, only thing I have is a Bible, a couple of letters from my mom. That's it, in a little paper bag. And they open the door and put me in there. And next thing I know, somebody swings a fist at me. I duck that one. The next one catches me, and I'm fighting immediately. The door opens back up. There's mace sprayed. Sergeant Ivy's yanking people off of me. I'm on the ground. And he says, are you ready to go to PC now? Do you need to catch out? And the guys are hollering, catch out, bitch, catch out. Oh, all these horrible things, which catch out means to leave the barracks and to go into protective custody. And like I said, I knew I needed to earn these people's respect because I did not know how long I would be there. I know I'm innocent, but I don't know how long I'm going to be in this prison. And so I tell them, no, leave me. And next thing I know, we go from the day room tier downstairs. The guys push all the racks up against the wall. They circle around us, and I'm fighting this guy, and then I'm fighting this guy, and there's people hitting me from behind. So it's kind of orderly and fair, but then again, it's kind of not. And so I fight the whole barracks that Friday, everybody. And then they call shower call, and the barracks next door, 8 barracks, they call 2 barracks at a time to go to shower. The shower holds 100 people. And so when I get there, I got to fight all these guys from 8 barracks. And so I fought all weekend. My whole face was swole up. My fists were swole up. My body was beat. And so I do this all weekend. I get into fights in the chow hall even, because there's even other people from other barracks is wanting to get to me in the chow hall and stuff like that. Come Monday morning, I'm barely even able to walk, and the guys are just pushing me and guiding me a bit in which way to go and stuff, because I can't even see even less than I normally do because my eyes and stuff are all swollen up. And I just remember thinking that whole weekend about this job out in the fields, whole squad. there's going to be sunshine, there's going to be a dawn, and I'm going to get to witness that. I was just looking forward to that first dawn, that morning air. And so there was a part of me, just no matter how bad it was, I was just looking forward to that first dawn. I'm like, if I can make it to that, if I can make it to that, that's something good.
It's interesting. 15, 20 years ago, I was going around to different studios in Hollywood and saying we should do a show that features these type of cases and shine a light on these injustices. And people were like, no, nobody wants that, And right. Now it seems like every other show you turn on.
I have several of them.
Yeah, you do. You have
Wrong Man on Stars, and I did a show for Discovery called Killing Richard Glossop, who another horrible case that I wish people would pay more attention to. Richard Glossop's on Oklahoma's death row. The state has tried to kill him 3 times. The last time they tried to kill him, the portal was in his arm, and they were using the wrong execution drugs, and the clock struck 3, which is the appointed killing hour, and the family on the outside thought the stay had not come, as it had several times before, crying and hugging, thinking that he had been killed, when in fact what was going on inside the death room was an argument between the state's attorney general and the head of prisons trying to figure out whether they should kill this guy because they had the wrong execution drugs. And that fracas, and it's the second time there was the wrong execution drugs were being used. There's a moratorium on executions in Oklahoma, and that's the only thing that's keeping Richard Glossop alive, as opposed to this bizarre story that the prosecution has given as to why he deserves to be killed, which is completely bogus.
The case of Richard Glossop came to my attention several years ago, and I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. I mean, let's talk about him, because we do need to bring more attention to it. Can you give us the capsule summary of this? There's
not a long story to tell. It's Richard Glossop was the manager of a kind of a sleazy motel, and he is accused of hiring the motel's janitor, who he had given a job to only a few months before, to kill the owner of the hotel so that he could take it over. The whole story on its face, when you pick it apart, is ridiculous. The guy who actually did the killing is the junkie hotel janitor maintenance man named Justin Sneed, and he was convicted of the murder, but was not sentenced to death. He cut a deal, pointed a finger at his boss. There's zero evidence, zero corroboration. We did some forensic accounting, or the defense attorney did some forensic accounting to show this idea of swindling and taking money is bogus. But conspiracy to murder, hiring somebody to do a murder, is a capital offense. And these guys wanted that notch on their belt. I'm convinced. I mean, there's just, if you look at the evidence, there is none. It's just one of these cases where it's so bizarre. And this guy has been on, it's been 2 years since I did the show. It's either 35 days or 38 days prior to your execution. You're moved from one terrible cell in death row to your final cell where you're placed on death watch, where the lights are on 24/7. You now only have one meal a day. You are sleeping on a thin, half-inch excuse for a mattress instead of a real cot. And they're just trying to wear you down. And this poor guy has gone through this process 3 times. He's had the portal placed in his arm awaiting the lethal injection drugs when they realized, we have the wrong drugs. That's the only thing that has saved this guy. Were 2 mistakes by the prison. The first attempt to kill him, there was a stay because a new witness came along and the government dismissed it as being relevant. But that was the first day. The other 2 stays, the last 2 stays, were because of botched execution. And there's just no evidence tying this guy to the murder. The convicted killer who confessed to doing it is serving a life sentence, whereas the guy who allegedly hired him, for which there's no proof, is on death row under the most miserable conditions, And this is where, my big thing is prosecutorial immunity. On the one hand, it's been argued to me, well, prosecutors have to be immune from their actions because, in many places, prosecutors are underpaid. You wouldn't get good prosecutors to do their job if they were fearful of immunity. I get that on a certain level, and there's lots of great prosecutors, and not everyone's a bad guy, and not every cop's a bad cop, and I'm like you can't paint people with a broad stroke. But there's got to be a happy medium where willful withholding of evidence, prosecutors have got to be held accountable. And a lot of this shit would go away, in my opinion. I mean, Judge Janine Pirro, the Fox commentator. In the case of Jeffrey Deskovic, she fought DNA testing for a long time.